Welcome to Energy Innovations, a regular video series that explores the latest innovations in technology, digital, regulations, products, services, finance, and business models that are impacting the energy sector. Energy Innovations interviews entrepreneurs, energy companies, capital markets, and regulators to understand how the energy industry is changing.
Welcome to Energy Innovations, and today I'm going to explore a new business model or business concept that relates to the whole world of carbon credits, carbon tracking, carbon tracing. And specifically, the innovation is a company called ReWatt, headed up by Prageet Nibber, who has evolved this concept of a marketplace for companies that have a requirement to deal with their carbon emissions and companies that offer possible solutions to carbon emissions through investments. And we're going to talk through how that all works and then the innovation that's here. So let's bring Prageet in. Prageet, welcome to Energy Innovations.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And so let's unpack this equation and this whole story here. I know that your company started, because you and I have known each other for some time, your company started out initially working in this whole world of finance and capitalization and the like. Can you just relay a little bit of the story that gets us to the point of where we can now unpack the whole idea of a marketplace and how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So ReWatt found its roots in the Canadian oil country of Alberta. And what we were trying to do was help oil and gas companies finance solar projects, remote oil field solar projects. And what we found was that when oil prices dropped, the financing also dried out as well. And so that's where we started to look for alternative sources of funding. And Alberta has a carbon market, and we recognized that there was an opportunity for us to leverage the environmental benefits that get created by investing in solar and use those as a way to generate credits so that companies could manage their carbon tax obligations. So just to rewind there a little bit, carbon markets, for those that don't know, are a way of evaluating or pricing what a ton of CO2 either removed or avoided in the atmosphere is. So it's a way to price and then to quantify specific kinds of actions. And so Alberta has rules. There are over 68 different markets globally that exist. And they're either cap and trade systems or they're carbon pricing schemes. There's a variety of different ways in which they look. But what we recognize was that this is quite an important source of financing to get people to take climate action. And so that's where we started.
I got it. So let's for the interests of trying to unfurl or explain exactly how this works. Let's imagine I have a facility in a jurisdiction blessed with good sunshine and a big rooftop. So
yes.
But solar panels are expensive, and just generating my own power might offset some of my own electrical costs, but might not be sufficient to justify the investment. Meanwhile, we've got a heavy polluter somewhere, cement manufacturer, oil sands facility, someone using a lot of fossil fuel to generate energy. They have a looming carbon problem because they're going to be paying a large tax. So where's the innovation here in terms of creating the the ability to these people who need funding to, say, put their solar panels on the roof with those who have the money happen to be paying a carbon tax? How does the marketplace actually work?
Yeah. So in terms of how that marketplace comes to be is we're going to start with the buyers. There's companies out there that are producing emissions, and depending on which system in which they operate, they are required to take some action. And so they will look at your solar project and say, okay, this is one way that I can help finance emission reductions that I can't take on myself directly. And so the marketplace mechanism is enabling the buyer to have confidence that those actions, that your solar panel is going to get built, and it allows them to have confidence in what they're investing in. It gives them the benefit of being able to either report because they have some net zero mandate, or they have some compliance reasons that they have to demonstrate that they're reducing their tons of CO2. And then on the buyer side, on your side, as developing this project, you now have a source of financing that can cover anywhere up to 50% of your capital costs. These credits can be very valuable to a project. We've seen municipalities leveraging carbon markets as a way to finance their climate change activities. We've seen utilities take it on as part of meeting renewable portfolio standards. And then we've seen individual generators or project developers taking advantage so that they can get their projects built faster than they would if they had to go through traditional financing routes.
And we've mentioned solar as just one instance, but surely this would apply to many different kinds of alternative energies that are low carbon, including wind farms, I'm guessing, and maybe thermal projects, I suppose.
That's right. There's actually, carbon credits can take the shape of many different things and come from many sources. And so there's carbon that is avoided. So that is electrification projects, things like fuel switching. So going from a high carbon intensity fuel like diesel to maybe a biofuel, where there's a fuel switching. There's a cost to doing that, but the carbon intensity is much lower. So you've avoided releasing a certain amount of carbon into the atmosphere. Then there's carbon removal, which is you're taking carbon and pulling it out of the atmosphere. And so companies can generate credits from investing in both of these actions. So there's a case, there's how do you measure what carbon removal looks like? You have to be able to measure carbon avoidance. There's methodologies that exist that are very well documented as to how companies, countries, and individuals can understand what their carbon footprint is, and how you can quantify the carbon avoided or the carbon removed from a specific project. And so what ReWatt focuses on is those carbon avoided projects. So this is investment in low carbon intensity infrastructure focused on electrification. So this is renewables, energy efficiency within buildings, curbing your energy consumption at a specific site. And then also looking at clean transportation and fuel switching, so that we can also have a clean transportation system. So California has the low carbon fuel standard. Canada will soon be seeing the clean fuel standard go into effect in 2023, potentially. So hopefully we'll see that soon. And why we focused on these types of projects is because they are measurable, these are permanent solutions, and they're a way for a company to directly invest in something that they can have, that they can defend.
Yeah, so there's an accusation, I think, lurking out there by some that this is just a bit of money, and you can put a veneer of "I'm green" on your business. But we are talking about quite serious money now, because the taxes that are going to be applied to carbon are starting to ramp up, and so I think that excuse kind of goes away. This is a real for businesses that are out there or might be watching this saying, "Well, I don't have to. This isn't for me. I'm not a big enough polluter." The answer probably isn't that you should stand on the sidelines and ignore this. You actually can participate and create solutions.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. So companies, irrespective of size, will have a carbon impact, and all organizations are being asked by their stakeholders, whether it be their customers, their investors, their employees, are being asked, what are you doing to address the climate crisis? And carbon markets are one way to evidence and also be rewarded for those activities. So they are both a stick and a carrot solution.
At the same time, yeah.
At the same time. And making sure that market works efficiently and addresses some of those concerns around, are projects overstating their carbon impact? Are they actually measurable? Like, is this leading to the environmental change that we need to see? Is this a form of greenwashing because I'm investing in this project here and it's helping me continue to finance other types of activities that are not as clean or as valuable somewhere else? Those are things that companies are now being required to report on. So whether or not they want to, there's either a compliance reason, like the government saying you have to do this, or there is a voluntary mandate. And I would argue that in many cases, what is considered voluntary is not voluntary in any way, shape, or form. They actually have to satisfy their shareholders and their other stakeholders.
If I had imagining here, if I have a boiler in my facility and it's an older boiler, inefficient burner tip technology, it may have hasn't been inspected lately, and so it might have some methane leakage and other problems associated with it. So one pathway is I go and invest in alternative in credits so that I can help someone with a more economically interesting project to finance them, or I can put the money into fixing my own burner tip. At what point does the market say you need to fix your burner tip? Like the era of ignoring your facility's shortcomings is over, and the idea that you can just go and buy credits and not have to do anything is coming to an end. Are we at that stage yet?
I would say yes, we are fast approaching that point where companies cannot just outsource to the market and purchase investments or emission reductions in other projects. They do have to take
meaningful action,
meaningful action for their own activities. And the net zero standards that are being adopted actually do focus on that. They say, first, focus on your, there's this concept of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. And so these are, scope 1 and 2 are really about your direct emissions. Scope 2 is your, let me start with scope 1. Scope 1 is your direct activity.
I pull gas into my facility and I run a burner tip and I heat water to, say, prepare a food in a food processing facility. That's a scope 1 emission.
That's a scope 1 emission, exactly. And then your scope 2 is the power that I use to run my facility is coming from the grid, and the grid is predominantly coal, powered by coal, or is the energy coming from solar or wind or other renewable sources? Then you have your scope 3 emissions, and that's supply chain focused.
Yeah.
So understanding that your the fuels that you're using to
transportation, flying, everything,
flying. It's also the types of materials that are baked into your products. So if you're using petroleum-based, if you're using petroleum-based plastics.
Plastics, paint, carpeting, all kinds of industrial or consumer and industrial products have fossil fuel-based petroleum products in them.
Exactly. And so what scope 3 is saying, understanding your entire impact means looking at beyond just your direct emissions that you directly influence.
And so this helps understand why ReWatt is also looking at the transportation system, because we need the incentive structure and the mechanisms to finance the ability to tackle scope 3. So let's unpack a little bit about ReWatt. How does it, like, what what is it? Like, what do I? It sounds like it's a pure virtual business. It's not like there's a real buyers and sellers getting together at a commodity pit and saying, hey, I want to spend so much money. It's a digital answer to this industrial problem.
That's right, and it's using vast amounts of data to actually do the calculations and then to facilitate the market. And the way that so we have a software platform. We don't have any hardware. What we are doing is we're connecting to internet connected devices, and that can be meters on site that are recording generation, consumption of different fuels, and also tracking weather patterns and market data as well. So what does the grid composition look like at any given point in time? So what we're doing is we're collecting all of this data around a specific site and measuring what the carbon reduction actually looks like if you were to implement solar panels, if you were to implement a variety of different types of energy efficiency measures within your building or your home, if you were to transition to electric vehicles. So what we're doing is we collect the data, we measure it, we ensure that information that we're collecting about a site is complete and accurate. And then we leverage a blockchain technology to enable a marketplace to allow these buyers and sellers to confirm or agree on the fact that those emission reductions have happened the way that they are reported, and then to trade them. We really are focused on creating that end-to-end solution. You have to have the measurement to enable the transactions on the other end.
Yeah, just to unpack that a little bit, the problem many companies will face is knowing where to invest. What is their actual emissions footprint? Which ones really matter? If they made an investment, are they going to really move their position? And a lot of companies, we haven't historically had to ever measure all of this carbon emission data. Hence, I think you start off by saying it's really key. We have to have the methodologies and the standard way to do this. Otherwise, what I claim is a carbon opportunity and what you think is the carbon, we might disagree. And in which case, how do you then create a marketplace if the parties can't agree to what the value is?
That's right. There's that has historically been one of the challenges with the carbon markets, and one of the arguments against using carbon markets is how do you create this consistency? The standards that are that exist in different systems doesn't always allow for an apples to apples comparison.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it is very, very important to get the buyers and the sellers to agree on what protocols they're using, the methodologies that are being adopted, And there is some standardization that is starting to happen now. There are some very well-established protocols that exist, and they're accepted. And what we're looking for now is broader acceptance of these protocols and these methodologies.
Yeah, companies shouldn't actually, when you think about it, if you embark on your own, I'm going to measure it in my way, you're actually creating a problem for yourself because your counterparties won't know, well, how are you measuring? What rules are you applying? What data are you collecting? How frequently? You can create for real problems for yourself if you're actually not doing this in a sort of a structured manner.
And costs.
Yes.
That's the other thing, is that to develop your own methodology and to get it approved is a very costly activity. And so you need to have certain types of expertise for it to be believed and approved in the market. So your buyers need to understand what it is that they're buying.
Precisely,
and
yeah.
Creating a methodology, does it have the right stamps of approval? And that is a very expensive process to undergo.
Yeah, it's the model to think about is how do you value stocks in a stock market? You know, there's an entire profession that's focused on rooting out fraud and trying to price correctly and to create value. The stakes are high in carbon. So running off on your own is not the right answer.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not one solution fits all. And there needs to be visibility and transparency within the system that can help the market run more efficiently than it currently does. There also needs to be tools that allow for collaboration because you have multiple parties that need to agree to these sets of standards. It's not just between a buyer and a seller, which in many cases it was in the past, saying, yep, I've managed to decide what my price of carbon is. This is what I'll give you. You have a lot more stakeholders that want visibility and access to the information that you're reporting or you're claiming. And those claims have a financial impact, they have an environmental impact, and they have a societal impact. We have to get all of those parties aligned around what we are doing to address climate change.
Now, you mentioned blockchain as one of the tools you're using here. Based on what I'm hearing, the enormous amounts of data that you need to collect tells me that you're probably using cloud-based analytic engines and the like, because the sheer volume of data is just so massive. You mentioned blockchain as a way of recording or tracking data. What other technologies are you stitching together here to create the marketplace?
I love that word. We are stitching technology, and you have to layer the technology together.
Oh yeah, they're converging is what's going on, and they're being bolted.
Yeah, there is this convergence that's happening, and so. One is making sure that you're collecting the volumes of data. The other is, the analytics have gotten very sophisticated around using machine learning analytics, or using machine learning to predict what consumption and generation will look like from any given site based on the readings that you're getting. Ensuring that the information that you're collecting is complete and accurate. You mentioned fraud as being one of the issues. You want to make sure that any claims and any data that you're applying to any carbon credit can be validated and traced, and that you can ensure that it has happened the way that you're saying it happens. And then we layer on the blockchain element to ensure that all those stakeholders that need to agree have that visibility and the right levels of permissions to access that data. We're dealing with really sensitive information. These are around energy consumption, and actually blockchain for us is one of the ways that we keep the information secure.
and accessible to parties, but in a highly controlled way. Yeah, exactly. There's sort of control the transparency of it. Right on.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Is it's enabling the marketplace, and it's also making it simpler to participate in the markets as well, for both the buyers and the sellers.
And the sellers, yeah. Plus regulators, plus financiers, plus. Like there's a lot of stakeholders who, as you point out, have an interest and a stake in this and want to the assurance that it is being done well. Where do you see the future of this headed? I mean, it feels like as a sort of a, and I'm smart enough about the industry, but if you're unfamiliar with this aspect of energy infrastructure, it feels like we aren't really progressing too quickly. So that says to me the upside is still dramatic here. We still have a long way to go. Am I right there, or is this largely a problem that is now well in hand and
carbon markets are still very nascent.
Very new.
The technology itself is still in the process of being adopted. Like companies are marrying the idea that they have to take action. Carbon markets are the way to do it. And we're going to use blockchain technology to help make that system operate and work. And so I would agree with your assessment. We are at the early stages. There's a massive opportunity here. And it's really important that we have meaningful discussions to make sure that we don't end up just using our technology to create something that is greenwashing. It's really meant to spur and put dollars where we need to take action, and to finance really meaningful change.
And right now, are you able to share who is kind of a market leader or ahead of the game here? It's just sort of thinking about the need to create and this financing platform. Are there some jurisdictions that are, say, further ahead than others?
There are, and I think we've seen a lot of activity in Europe, and they tend to be the leader in the way carbon markets are operating, and typically tend to be a model for the rest of the world and the jurisdictions that are looking to implement a form of carbon market or carbon financing. And then there are technology solutions that are starting to pop up to address these problems. ReWatt has spent a lot of time thinking through and working with partners in Alberta on how you get different parties to collaborate and how you get them to share their data and how you keep it private and how you get alignment on these protocols so that you can actually have a functioning market. These are all evolving. The future of it is enabling public-private partnerships in a way that I don't think we've seen before. We need private investment in this space. It needs to be measured and monitored. It needs to be measured. It needs to be permanent. And I don't think it can happen without these technology solutions.
Yeah, I think that just the sheer amount of data we're talking about, the lack of people to be able to manually do all this, the suspicion that the data is being manipulated when lots of fingers touch it, I think really points to the need for automation here. And it sounds like Alberta, because it's blessed with enormous energy resource wealth already, plus the sophistication of the marketplace creates a place where a company like ReWatt could be a true global industrial leader in doing these sorts of things, because we have the conditions right to be able to exploit these kinds of innovations.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is that we're starting in Alberta also gave us access to a wide variety of data that you might not get in other areas, in other jurisdictions. So combined with the fact that there is a carbon market, we have resources and we have lots of participants on both the buyer and the supplier side.
Yeah.
It's been a great place to start and to demonstrate what this can achieve in other markets when applied there.
Right on. Prageet, it's been fantastic to talk through this rather interesting area of energy innovation. Thank you so much for coming on Energy Innovations today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the next chat.
This brings to a close this episode. Join me again shortly for another deep dive into an energy innovation, and I'll return shortly with a new episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for joining our latest interview on energy innovations from EnergyNow Media. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. You can contact us at info@energynow.com to book your appearance or to become a sponsor.